Welcome everybody, and I see that we are live. So welcome everyone to the February 8th regular session of the Tigard-Tualatin School Board. There were no work sessions prior to this, so we will begin with our agenda this evening. Dr. Ricky Smith, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Chair Wolf, there is one. I would request that we move item, the EASH item.
Dr. Ricky Smith, yes. The volume, I see, you don't look like you're on mute, but the volume's not working.
All right, thank you. My apologies. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine.
Okay.
I think it's you, Maureen.
That is my day. Excellent work, Dr. Ricky Smith.
Thank you. I would ask that action item B regarding the draft of the East District Plan be moved to reports and discussions, as it does not require a board action.
I was going to suggest the exact same thing.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you for making that adjustment. And then I think with that, we will move forward with the consent agenda, walking through that, and then I'll call for a motion with the agenda as modified. This evening's consent agenda includes the January 11th work session and meeting minutes, human resources, personnel action report, second reading board policies, and then information agenda ARs updated, and CARES community-wide learning support childcare grant for both Club K and YMCA. Board members, are there any items to be pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, with that, I will call for a motion to approve the agenda as modified, and we'll just do a quick aye or nay on that.
I move to approve the agenda as modified.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded to approve the agenda as modified. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we will move to recognition and good news. Lisa Burton and Tracy Rose.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. And this evening I will be sharing with you a two-part, the first part of a two-part series celebrating Black history. And this evening, we are joined by teachers, Byram teachers, Teresa Brognas, and teacher Kelly Shelton. I had the privilege this morning actually to join Teresa's class, which was amazing. They were starting their lesson that highlights artist Alma Woodsy Thomas. The lesson was created by Kelly and Teresa, and it was created for the school, but I would love for them to share a little bit more about the lesson. I shared the slide deck with all of you in the agenda, and they will share a little bit more about it. And then I'm sure you'll all have questions. So welcome, Shelley and Teresa. Or Kelly and Teresa, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you so much for coming to my class today. The kids were just thrilled. Well, to see another face besides mine, I'm sure. And thank you, all of you, for inviting us. We appreciate it. We've been trying to do a lot at Byram with the head, heart, hands model. And Kelly knows a lot about that. Kelly, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So we made a goal at the beginning of this year to make sure that we are working through that process, and we want to be thinking, feeling, and then most importantly, doing. And so a few of the things that we've been doing at Byram to celebrate and recognize Black History Month at this time we are working in the classrooms with the beautiful art projects that Teresa Brogna will be talking about. And we're also doing a quote of the day. So the quote of the day, we are highlighting the historical impact of one notable figure representing a wide range of genres such as civil rights leaders, politicians, social influencers, scientists, poets, writers, entertainers, and athletes, and really providing students with a depth of breadth and depth. And then we're sharing those quotes, and students are identifying the historical impact and influence of those quotes and of those people. And then also we are going to be having an assembly at the end of the month. And at the assembly, our students will be sharing and performing. They'll be sharing cultural experiences such as dance. They'll be sharing about the evolution of hairstyles and talking about historical figures as well. And the thing that we are most excited about is this year, we wanted to offer our students an opportunity not just to learn about Black history and historical figures, but to become part of history themselves. And so what we're doing is we are launching our Black Student Union this month. We are creating a Founders Day, so the members that will be starting will be recognized as the founders of the Black Student Union. They will be creating a mural that we will be painting on the walls at Byram, and we will recognize them at the assembly, and then we're going to give them a part to play and keep in contact with them, and they'll be coming back and they'll be speaking to our future Black Student Union members. And so we're really trying to provide an opportunity for them to be recognized and also to become a historical part of Byram. And that's a commitment that we have decided at Byram at the beginning of the year, that we were going to move through this head, heart, hand process. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Kelly has done so much work. I'm so proud of you, Kelly, and I'm so thankful that I get to work with you. One of the other things that we're doing at Byram is we decided for Black History Month that we wanted to focus not just on sadness, because that's, that our history is important, but we also don't want the kids to just associate sad things that have happened with Black history. And so we thought that our art literacy would be a good way to incorporate that. So the first two artists that we are highlighting are African-American women, yay, and they're also teachers. Well, they're both passed away, but they were also teachers. And the first one that we did today was Alma Woolsey Thomas, and this is some of her painting, but that's not the important part. The important part is some of the kids' recreations based off of her work. And they're just so excited to learn about history and to get their hands in there. This is another one that turned out really pretty. Two more. And then that one I thought was really interesting. And then finally that one. So we really, like Kelly said, we really want to get the kids involved in it instead of just being bystanders on the outside. We want them involved in the movement. And there was a quote, I had my kids watch part of the presidential inauguration, and that the author or the poet, Amanda Gorman, she was the poet in residence. And so this is like one of my favorite quotes from her. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. And so we're just really trying to implement that at Byram, that we want them to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you both so much, Teresa and Kelly. I loved the compilation, the presentation, the slides that Lisa shared with us about the work and the evidence in the White House. That was really a fun slide to see as well. Anyway, just so appreciate the work that you're doing, and to celebrate and have such an active engagement with the students is wonderful. So board members, anything you'd like to share?
I just wanted to say thank you for including all of the student artwork. Some of those pieces were just beautiful, and I can really picture the kids doing that kind of an artwork. It's a perfect kind of project for that age group, because it's colorful and it's tactile and it's all of the things that you want to do. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, and thank you for being here tonight. One question is, I'm curious if you've heard any feedback from parents of the students about the lesson plan or the curriculum, and what their thoughts were.
You know, that's really interesting. I have not, and I actually have a little boy in my class who's, yeah, I kind of expected that. And she actually went out and bought paints for him. So no, I have not. I know, Kelly, you said that you've gotten a little bit of feedback for the equity work that you're doing in your class, haven't you?
Yeah, most of the comments that I've received have actually been very positive. Parents have, you know, especially because I teach second grade, so parents will often sit near their students and will be listening to the lessons that we're teaching. And most of the comments that I've received have been very positive.
That's very, very exciting to hear. And thank you again for being with us tonight.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for sharing your work and what you're doing for our students. And I love Alma Woolsey Thomas. I love her. It's so beautiful. What a great, like Jill said, it's great for easy for, not easy, but doable for students too. So thank you for sharing that. This is awesome.
Dr. Sue, anything you'd like to add?
Actually, Director Emerson.
Thank you. Too slow on the draw. Definitely love the artwork slide. It wasn't addressed, but we did get information about the books that are being read aloud, and then the guiding questions or the reflective questions that are being asked. And I just really appreciated the variety and then the age appropriateness that's being offered. But to give those tools to the teachers to help them have a conversation with their class. I really appreciated all of that. So thank you.
I just wanted to say that we got a social justice book list at the beginning of the year, and I believe that maybe came from Zinnia. Was that from you, Zinnia?
No, it was from our staff pillar leaders, Katie Topple and Laurel Fisher. They're leading our staff equity PD.
That's been an invaluable resource for us to just, a lot of them just have links right to them. But the kids have just really enjoyed them, and it made it a lot easier for us to highlight Black history. So thank you.
It's outstanding.
And the only piece that I would add here this evening for both Teresa and Kelly is to say thank you for the way in which you're making Amanda Gorman's words come alive, in the sense of not just beginning a Black student union group, but really making them a part of the living, breathing process over the coming years, and keeping them vested in that process, because that is how we grow as a community, we learn together as a community, and make it accessible to the community in ways that are easily understood. And so I want to say thank you for your thinking, for helping our students walk and in lived experiences of those that have gone before them, and then also bestowing them the opportunity to continue to lead into the future. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Dr. Sue.
All righty. Well, thank you again, both of you, for taking the time to join us and to celebrate the work at Byram. Just so appreciate that. So with that, we will move to student representative reports. And
can I just share one more thing? Sorry.
Oh, sure. I apologize.
That's okay. I wanted to just share, there also is a presentation in your agenda, a link to a bilingual Spanish-English slide deck that was created by the Bridgeport Equity team, Juliana Schmidt and Mariana Penalfaro. And this presentation or slide deck has some resources that they have provided to their teachers. I just ask you to take a moment to look at it. There's some really great resources and videos and different things that they wanted to share and weren't able to be here this evening, but just some great work that they are also doing at Bridgeport. And I think I had put, I'm sorry, I put Byram in the agenda, but it's actually Bridgeport. It's actually Bridgeport's team. So we have Byram's team and then Bridgeport's team both sharing work. So sorry about that.
Well, I thank you, Lisa, because in my head I thought there were two things, and then I saw Byram. I'm like, okay, never fine. This is not my evening. I don't think so. Anyway, thank you both for being here. And Lisa, thank you for clarifying that to ensure that we take that time to review all the materials celebrating this month.
And then next meeting, we will have some other groups that will be joining us, but just some groups that are doing more work with our secondary students and some celebrations that are happening across the district. So we can look forward to that as well.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so I think then at this point, we'll move to student representative reports. I saw Rowan, and I'm trying to see, is Emily here?
I think Emily's Wi-Fi went out, so I'm not sure if she's here right now, but she should be coming back.
Okay, so I don't see Eddie either, so guess who's up? So Rowan, we'll go ahead and let you get started and see if Emily's able to join us after you're done.
All right, yeah, I didn't really have much. We started the new semester today, and as far as I could tell, everything went pretty great. At the start of the year, when everybody was using Canvas for the first time, it was a little rough, but I didn't really see that today. And I didn't hear about that today. So it's been pretty good. And last week was finals week, but most, or I guess, I don't know if I can say most teachers, but a lot of teachers didn't give full finals. And so that really helped. So it's been a pretty good 2 weeks.
Thanks, Rowan. And I'm still, not seeing Emily. So I think we will move forward with Superintendent Board Communication. And then if Emily pops in, we'll just take a moment and let Emily share her update as well. So Dr. Reiki-Smith.
Thank you so much, Chair. This evening, I just want to update you relative to the ongoing work that's been going on really all year long. Our focus is on instruction, even though our reports to the board have been more relative to the Ready Schools, Safe Learners, hybrid and online options, which have captured, and noticeably so, in our community's attention relative to where the district is moving with those processes, but did not want us to take our eye off the ball relative to the good work that's going on with instruction. And as many of you know, I had the opportunity to meet in what we call Sit with Sue's, where I go and sit with staff and have conversation and provide information, but more importantly, listen to the work that they are doing. And many of you have had the opportunity to join me this year relative to those virtual visits as well as in person. So I thought I'd share just a quick snapshot of what we're hearing from the field, starting with elementary. This is from Principal Swindle at Metzger Elementary. The work that they are focused to right now is relative to standing up limited in-person instruction that will kick off on February 16th, the day after President's Day next week, as will programs at CFT and Bridgeport Elementaries. At Metzger, 15 students will come in from 8:15 to 10:15 a.m. They will receive support from staff in accessing their core instruction in a warm, safe classroom where they will ensure that they have all the supplies that they need, including a full belly, and academic support from adults to help students advance in reading and math and completing their work. Students will arrive by bus. And she says, as we stated, this is our most intensive students who have struggled to access comprehensive distance learning for a variety of reasons, but most specifically, they are navigating poverty and often have parents who have to work multiple jobs to pay the rent at the same time. This is completely voluntary on the staff's part currently as they move through the vaccination cycle, and they have 6 certified and classified members who have volunteered to come forward to support the program. And they're excited that they'll be able to get in front of their students on February 16th. At CFT in Bridgeport, their limited in-person program will also begin February 16th and will run from 1:30 to 3 p.m. each day. The volunteer-based staff at each site will again focus on reading and math instruction and work completion. And the elementary team in total across our 10 elementary schools continues to collaborate and are planning for more schools to launch limited in-person instruction as more and more folks are willing to volunteer in each building. And then she shared just 2 quick emails from parents. One, a first grade parent at Metzger. Dear Principal Swindle, I wanted to drop you a thank you note to you and your amazing staff for all the efforts you've put into keeping parents informed. All the phone calls, emails, meetings, and videos, it's pretty remarkable. I also sincerely appreciate all the planning you've put into making sure that both online and in-person learning are the best they can be. It makes me feel very confident that my boy's education is in great hands with Metzger and TTSD. And then from a Metzger Fowler parent who says, this email is simply just to tell you how impressed I am with all the work you and your staff have put to be ready for the return to school. The presentation was extremely well done, clear to understand, and full of the details we were needing. There are so many moving pieces, and I just wanted to send a note to let you know how hard I see you all working, and it is so greatly appreciated. You guys at the school and district amaze me. Thanks for all you do in taking care of our kids through all of this. Then at the middle and secondary levels, this past week, College and Career Coordinator Chris Llewellyn and I attended the Tualatin STEAM meeting. Chris reported that this program continues to support STEM education at our middle and secondary schools on the Tualatin side. Beginning this month, our Hazelbrook 6th graders will have an opportunity to participate in a Rube Goldberg machine competition. Students will design, build, and test their machines, recording their processes on video and submitting them for evaluation. 5 $100 gift cards will be awarded to the top 5 submissions that demonstrate the greatest amount of learning, not the one that is most successful. Tualatin High School marketing students, mentored by local Tualatin graphic arts and marketing businesses, are developing the marketing materials targeting as many Hazelbrook 6th graders as possible to join into the competition. So a great way to connect that work ready between our high school students virtually with our businesses virtually. That work continues. And another hashtag work ready virtual job fair for all TTSD 8th graders is in the works, thanks to continued collaboration with the Tigard-Tualatin Chambers of Commerce. Additionally, the girls-only science event held at the high school last year at Tigard is currently planned as a virtual event this year, thanks to now retired Linda Mulholt and Lamb Industries. And so there will be more to come on that. And then this latest update just received this evening from OSAA that I know will be of particular interest to our secondary families. The executive board of OSAA remains focused on getting permitted season 2 activities up and running. And here is a brief breakdown where each season 2 sport stands as of today, February 8th. Cross country and soccer are able to start their practices on February 22nd and to begin contests on March 1st. And we're extremely excited to get these students back participating. Volleyball is set to begin on February 22nd with practices and March 1st with contests for schools that are in the high, moderate, or lower county risk levels. And later on this evening, I will share with the board in preparation for Dr. McCall and Director Field's report relative to K-12 instruction, the current metrics, and that we anticipate that the Tri-Met counties may receive a downgrading of their county risk value this week. This week is a movement week per the Oregon Health Authority, and we are anticipating additional counties moving out of the extreme risk designation. For those counties that have to remain in risk, high extreme risk, they will not be allowed any sports that have to do with competition. However, those that are moved out of the extreme high risk may begin to receive direction as to allowing volleyball indoor competitions. And so we look forward to both hearing about our county's designation as well as OSAA's direction. Non-contact conditioning football practices scheduled to begin this week are able to proceed. Contact football is still prohibited by the governor's office, but based on recent conversations, we anticipate, that is OSAA, potential changes to contact sports guidance in the coming days. The board adopted several alternative options such as 7-on-7, flag, and virtual lineman challenge, virtual combine, to provide opportunities for schools and students depending on how things unfold. And that is the latest from my desk.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Questions?
So will those videos of those Rube Goldberg machines that students come up with, will we be able to see any of them?
Yes, I've asked Chris that as soon as they have, had those collected and judged, that they would be made available. And I'm thinking perhaps maybe for a report in Good News, for the board, that might be an opportunity. And so Lisa Burton and Director Rose and I will have conversation about how we can gather those up for the board.
Thank you.
Dr.
Yeah,
Super,
it's very exciting stuff. I'm really thrilled. Yes, Director Bowman.
certainly interested in the Rube Goldberg videos. Also curious about, and this might be a Brian Bailey or Michael DeLerba question too, but in terms of the athletics, potential athletics changes, what is the sort of, I guess, like communication tree, assuming a change happens, I imagine it will take effect pretty quickly, and competitions will start, et cetera. What's the district's plan for communicating that to players, coaches, parents, et cetera?
I would defer to both Principal DeLerba and Principal Bailey because they have a pretty tight process for that. So gentlemen, either one of you, because since I know that you're very tightly aligned.
Sure, I'll jump in and Brian can fill in the gaps. We've been sharing the same brain for the last month, last 6 months really. So whatever I miss, he'll fill in. We meet weekly with our athletic directors and with Director Fields and Dr. Ricky Smith, and go over changes. Today when we met, we really talked through the indoor current indoor guidelines that we proposed through electronically last week, and kind of vetted the processes through our local health teams, had our nurses take a look at those processes. We will start to roll out some small groups, as Dr. Ricky Smith mentioned earlier, soon. Our typical communication chain will go right through our athletic directors to our head coaches, to our assistant coaches, and out to families. And we also will post things in our weekly bulletin so that people kind of have multiple access points, and also gets translated into Spanish. And then specifically to the guidelines, what we're planning on doing is producing some video work to go along with what our coaches will communicate out once it gets to a place of scaling up our indoor activities. Once, if at all, things shift throughout the counties to lower the risk levels in, so we can open up opportunities. We'll have some training materials for families, for students to be able to watch that together. And then, so they understand our screening process and everything else that's in place before they can participate in person. So that's kind of the plan. Brian, did you want to fill in the gaps?
No, just really primarily the communication runs through our ADs to our head coaches and then out to the families via that network. They have both social media and school district communications. Our biggest challenge, I would say, is making sure that families that are interested in these activities are also signing up through the district so that they're a part of those listservs. That's our area of growth that we have, but our coaches are doing a great job of staying in touch with their families and with their kids and parents both, as we update this information and continue to move forward.
I would also offer Director Bowman that athletics is not considered one of the 4 cohorts when we count a student's day at the secondary level. And so, however, should a student be found positive as part of the athletic and be engaged in a cohort, that cohort relative to instruction would be impacted.
Okay, so I want to acknowledge Emily. What we will do is we'll finish SUP board communication, and before we jump to public comment, I'll have you update us from Tualatin. So with that, board members, anything you'd like to share?
I just want to say, first of all, I'm really glad that vaccines are rolling out to our teachers. That's like music to my ears every time I hear it. But I also want to give a shout out to all of our teachers who are volunteering without vaccines to go in and teach Lippy, because that's really important work for kids who really need it, and there is risk involved, and I really appreciate the people who are willing to volunteer for that. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, and I also, when I ditto that, I was present on the Sit with Sue for Metzger, and Jessica specifically mentioned all the volunteers, and same Jill, just really appreciate them volunteering, and especially, you know, for some of the special ed students who need to be in our schools, and struggling students. And so I just I can't say enough about those, not only at Metzger but also Bridgeport.
Just a quick maybe plug for me. I'm looking forward to the rest of our conversations and reports tonight. But this weekend I had a moment to dive in to all the numerous pieces of legislation that have been introduced for this session related to education that have been assigned to the House or Senate Education Committee. And there's dozens and dozens of them as usual, but some really struck me. I mean, we all know that the legislature has a massive impact in terms of our budget and what we're able to offer in terms of class sizes and school days, but there's a lot of other bills, from everything from, you know, student safety. Some seem COVID inspired. Some seem sort of unrelated to the school closures of last year. But for folks interested, it's called the Oregon Legislative Information System. If you Google that, you can find the committees and see all the bills that have been assigned to the various committees. And the House Education Committee, for example, is already scheduling for public hearings. So things are moving down in Salem, and we'll need to be ready to implement as they happen. But that was just the blurb I wanted to offer.
Actually, Ben, I appreciate that as we think about TTSD's own. It's kind of nice actually to kind of sit back, receive, absorb, process, and then how does that align with what the legislative priorities will be for us as we continue our advocacy. And so I appreciate Ben's plug for OLS. And then I think you guys all received the legislative updates and those communications from OSBA as well, as Richard and Lori work on trying to advocate or whack-a-mole sometimes, as they call legislation that may be not as easy for us to take on. So anyway, thank you so much for that. And let's see, Karen, anything you'd like to share?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, I think I will pass as well. And with that, Emily, why don't we hear your update, and then we'll go to public comment.
Okay, so today, second semester started, and I'm sure Rowan already said that, and we had no problems with student schedules, which was really great. And it seems like the technology transition went really well. I didn't hear anything, and also, counselors were able to email back really quickly to students who wanted schedule changes, which I think to me signaled that they didn't have many problems, because usually within the first 2 weeks of a semester, students the counselor's office are really busy. So the fact that it's different in this time is really great. So, and then the Student Health Advisory Committee, they've started promoting tips on mental and physical health, and that's a club that's just kind of work in association with the school-based health center. And the school-based health center is having a drive-up dental and immunization event this Wednesday, and this Wednesday is also the book pickup. So students go in to get their textbooks and also drop off their old textbooks and materials from last semester. And then for Black History Month, the Black Student Union is highlighting a Black historical figure every day this month on their Instagram.
Thank you, Emily, and that's excellent. I've seen some teachers on Facebook do that as well and highlight every day, which I've really appreciated being able to learn and see. So with that, we will transition to public comment. As you all realize, we have transitioned now I think, Patty, to complete direct communication, right? There is no reading this evening. Is that correct? All 5 are, yeah.
That's correct, yes.
So
You're
they have,
gonna miss my voice, aren't you?
so our public comments have been invited as to attend this part of the session. So we'll hear from them directly. But with that, I'd like to remind our speakers, and at that time, Patty, I'll have you introduce them. I think you have them in order, if that's okay. So I'll have Patty do that, but for the individual speaking, please state your name and the purpose of your public comment. And then you will be given 3 minutes to speak. And while you can provide constructive criticism of the district, there is not allowed any disparaging comments about individuals. So I think with that, those are the high notes of public comment. So I will go ahead and use my phone. And if one other board member would do that as a check for me in case I forget to hit start on one of them, that would be great. And Patty, I'll hand it to you. Thank you.
Okay, I've invited Dina Reinerson to join our meeting tonight. Dina, are you there? Dina, can you hear me?
I think I just got restarted. Can you see
There
me?
you are.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I was a little bit worried about that. You ready for me to start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, timer's ready?
Timers are ready.
Okay. All right, my name is Dina Ryerson. I'm a TTSD school district, member of the TTS school district. I have a son who's a sophomore at Tualatin High School, another son who is a 7th grader who's been in the district up until this year when we moved him out of the district to St. Francis, but hope to bring him back next year. I'm also, we've prepared a group of parents, concerned parents have prepared a letter from around the district, with the goal to trying to get all students and all grades who want to go back to school in person. And it's signed by many parents in the district who you will hear about. I'm joined by Tanya Chappelle and Bob Patsky, who are also families in TTSD. Tanya has a 6th grader and an 8th grader in Fowler Middle School and a 10th grader who transferred this year out to Westside Christian. Bob has a 6th grader and an 8th grader in Hazelbrook. And due to the 3-minute time limit, we are taking the letter and reading it in portions so that we can get through the whole thing. Tanya will go after me and Bob will follow up in the end. So starting the letter. Dear Dr. Riki Smith and members of the school board, we would like to thank Dr. Sue for answering a portion of our questions asked in a letter that a community of parents sent to her and the board last week. Central office directors were included on her email response to parents indicating some of our logistical questions would be addressed, but as of this writing, we have not heard back from anyone in the district besides Dr. Sue. Now that vaccinations are on track to be completed soon, the county health metrics are trending downward, and other districts in our area and around the state have plans for children of all grades to go back. There is a sense of urgency to know what is happening in our district. We understand that some things are out of the district's control. However, there is so very much that is in your control. We want to concentrate on 2 main issues that we hope are the focus of everyone's conversations. First, we have asked numerous times when the families of the middle and high school students will see a survey asking whether families want their students to return to school, stay online, or are undecided. This is in the district's control. As you know, this information is critical for so many decisions to be made. How many students will need to be accounted for in the hybrid method? For those returning, who will need transportation? Which teachers will return and which will teach remotely? And more. We are asking that a survey be sent out as soon as possible so that there is no delay in bringing our middle and high school children back to school once the vaccinations are completed and the health metrics are met. Second, we would like to know what is left to be done. vaccinations aside, to bring our middle and high school students back. We presume there is a checklist for re-entry of the I'll start that over. We presume there is a checklist. That's okay.
Time.
That's time?
Yeah, I showed time. 3 minutes.
Okay. And then Tanya's next. She can maybe just start that second paragraph, that paragraph over. So just so it's clear.
Okay, thank you, Dina.
Thank you.
Tanya, are you able to hear us? Tanya?
I am unmuting and I've just started my video.
There
Hi.
you are.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to start off. My name is Tanya Chappelle. Okay, so second, we would like to know what is left to be done, vaccinations aside, to bring our middle and high school students back. We presume there is a checklist for the re-entry of the elementary school students, and that a similar checklist is being employed for the re-entry planning for our older students. We want to know in detail what is still left to accomplish and when that list will be complete. We have heard Dr. Sue mention that there have been many steps already taken, and we are so grateful for that. But what exactly is left to do, and what can we as parents do to help? We understand that elementary school teachers will receive training related to re-entry on March 11th and 12th. We want to know when the middle and high school grade teachers will be trained. Why can't that process be started in tandem with the elementary teachers to ensure once vaccinations are completed, that action can be taken right away to return our older students? Why can't Wednesdays be earmarked for this? This is in the district's control. It is only February 8th. Let's not waste precious time that could be used to ensure our teachers are trained and schools are ready to go once vaccinations are completed and metrics are met. If we truly are all in this together and care about children, as everyone has stated repeatedly, let's get creative and have a sense of urgency of how to get this done. The evidence is conclusive. Study after study has been conducted. The mental, social, and educational well-being of all children suffering as each day passes. We as parents see it in our children daily. I sure do. April 5th is the date set by this district to have grades K through 5 return in hybrid model, yet still we wait for a return date for the middle and high school students. What are the reasons they cannot go back the same time as elementary students or soon after if the teachers are vaccinated and trained well prior to April 5th? It is a safe assumption that they will be vaccinated soon, given the fact that middle school teachers are already able to make their appointments for their first dose. Although the completion of vaccines may be somewhat of a moving target, and high school teachers, other steps can be completed. If vaccinations don't happen for middle and high school teachers as fast as we need them to, can the ones who are vaccinated or otherwise want to return go back for those who are waiting to be vaccinated and have them teach virtually to a classroom monitored by a parent volunteer who are present in the classroom? This is happening more and more in other areas as creative solutions to enable students to return. We are begging for forward thinking for our district as others have done. The Westland Wilsonville School District will begin returning elementary students starting February 22nd, and by March 15th, all grades are scheduled to return. TTSD will not have even begun by this point. Beaverton, Portland, Hillsborough, and Lake Oswego all have set dates for middle school return. Additionally, Hillsborough, April 19th, and Lake Oswego,
I showed time.
April 12th.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, Patty.
Okay. And Bob should be joining the webinar. Bob, are you there? Takes a minute. Bob?
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, good evening. I'm Bob Patsky, and my wife, Christine Wiseman Patsky, and I have been residents for 15 years, and we have 2 students, as Dina said earlier. I'll jump right into the text of our letter. We're asking for urgency and transparency, and to let you know that we're willing to pitch in and help or do whatever it takes to get our middle school and high school students who want to return back to school. We learned at the last board meeting that the district lost 7% of its student population this year, whereas the state average and other similarly situated districts only lost 3 to 4%. We need to do better because we truly believe we have an amazing district. We need to pull together as a team and have the drive to make things happen. We want our district to be the one that others are envious of for our forward and creative thinking. Instead, we sit on the sidelines wishing we were part of a neighboring district as we watch their students go back and the light come back in their children's eyes. We've attached a letter that Governor Jay Inslee recently sent to the Washington Education Association, articulating very clearly the reasons that he feels it's absolutely safe and necessary to return children to in-person classrooms now. In it, he says, quote, "It falls upon us to make decisions about what we know now, not what we knew then. What we know now is that if done correctly and if done with full consideration of safe protocols, in-person learning can be done in a way that limits the spread of infection and in a way that improves student well-being and learning. We know this because we have new information based on experience, data, and science. These have been our guideposts from the beginning, and we need only to continue following them." Right now, I'm going to read the names of the families that signed this letter to the district, and I'll read names until my time is over. Michelle and Rebecca Hita, their student Michael. Chris and Emily Boyle, their students Allie Boyle, Caden Boyle, Bob Patsky and Christine Wiseman Patsky, their students Landon Patsky and Luke Patsky. Ryan and Amy Potter, their students Aiden, Colton, and Logan. Jill McCarty, her students Quinn McCarty and Max McCarty. Amy and Howard Zuckerman, their students Zach and Zoe. Troy and Michelle Javernick, their students Cassidy and Cole. Dina and Greg Ryerson, their students Nathan and Andrew. Katie Lemon, her children have both transferred out of our school district. And forgive me, I got a problem with that. Karen Soul, her son Jaden Soul. Paul and Amanda Schlumpberger, her student Luke Schlumpberger. Eileen and Tim Halm, no students listed for privacy reasons, I believe. Roland and Priscilla Johnson, Leah.
Bob, thank you for that. And if the names are listed as well, that'll be included in a public record.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, Patty, I think we have 2 more, correct?
Both of those comments have been withdrawn.
Okay.
So the 3 that have been shared are the only public comments we have.
Okay. All right. Then I appreciate those that participated in public comment, and we will now move to reports and discussion. And I see that Director Fields is ready to go. And so we will move to part 1, the 2019-20 graduation outcomes report.
Thank you. And thanks for having us this evening. Good evening, everyone. And Patty, are you able to present for us? Thank you. So as mentioned, we look forward to having a 2-part conversation with the board. And tonight's focus will be on the class of 2020 and the graduation outcomes that recently came out. And again, we are excited tonight to have Paul, who will be talking with us with our data, as well as Principal Romas, Principal Bailey, and Principal DeLerba all here this evening to have this conversation with you all. And with that, we will dive in. Next slide, please. And Paul, pass to you.
Thank you, Amber. So I want to start out by talking a little bit about the context of how a 4-year cohort graduation outcome is created. So therefore, we can see the two stories that we are trying to get from this data. The 4-year story that the data is intended for and was originally created for, as well as the 1-year story of our response to the pandemic. So the context is that ODE every year creates a cohort of all the new students that enter high school and then tracks them for 4 years and tracks their transfers in and out of each district, whether or not they join an alternative program or continue on to get their regular diploma, or are what ODE labels as non-completers. And so they track that data, and then at the end of 4 years, they then freeze the data and check to see where everyone ended up. And the last district that ever that a student was ever a part of becomes the accountable district for that student. So students that have been with us from their freshman year all the way to their senior year, as well as students that were here for only a month during that 4-year window, if we are the last district to have that student, then we are equally accountable for both. And so once they freeze that data and they attach the students to the last district that they attend, they then send all that data to the district. And that data becomes a great source of understanding our student mobility, because they let us know which students are transferring in and out of the district. It lets us know which students are joining those alternative programs, which students were able to get their 4-year graduation, as well as those who continue on to a 5th year to graduate as well. And so that's the 4-year story and the original intention behind the data, behind this data point. However, we also want to be able to look at this data for what occurred last year, because last year was an unprecedented year for all of us. And so we want to be able to use these graduation rates to be able to understand how we were able to impact our students who are dealing with this pandemic. And so what I do want to say is that after looking at the data, we were trending towards a plateau in our graduation rates and possibly a drop before the pandemic occurred. And the reason that I say that is because ODE, when they're tracking students moving between districts, they put a timestamp on what they call an exit event. So transferring to another district out of our district is called an exit event, and they timestamp that. When a student leaves our district and does not attend any other district, what they call non-completers, that is a timestamp when they left our district. When they graduate at the end of 4 years, they timestamp that. And so looking through this data, if the pandemic had if we expected the pandemic to have a large impact on our graduation rates, we would expect a spike in exit events towards the end of their senior year, or a spike in students that are moving on to their to the 5th year senior. And as I was able to separate that data into 4 groups, the non-completers as well as those who moved on to the next year, we were already seeing a small increase of those who were left Tigard-Tualatin and did not go anywhere else before their senior year, as well as an increase at the very beginning of their senior year from previous years, and then a little bit smaller of an increase after March, but no spike, as well as for those who continued on to become 5th year and continuing their enrollment and still making sure that they graduate. And so it's because of this lack of a spike towards the end of their senior year or continuing on to next year, that it's most likely that we were going to have that plateau and that drop, which means that there are some systemic issues that we are still facing, and we are going to be addressing that later on in the presentation. But it also means that our team did what they needed to do during a pandemic to get those seniors across the finish line. Because we did not have that spike, because we were already following the trend that we had started 4 years ago, our teams did what they needed to do in unprecedented circumstances. If we want to move on to the next slide, I do want to share that that 4-year story does end up with a drop, as I said, and it's a 1.6% drop in graduation rates from the previous year, as well as our drop in graduation rates was concentrated amongst our historically underserved students. It was concentrated in our students with disabilities, as well as our underserved races and ethnicities, and those who are economically disadvantaged. And that is, as Amber and her team are going to go into, a lot of the work that they have been doing. So I do want to pass it off to Amber to talk more specifically about the work that they did last year.
Thank you, Paul. Next slide. So here you see the breakdown, and board, you received this data prior to this evening, but where each of our schools fell, with Creekside at 48%, Tigard High at 89.8%, and Tualatin High School at 92.5%. At the end of the year, we had these number of seniors on CAP plans, which were the credit assurance plans from ODE's guidance, which was for seniors that didn't cross that finish line, putting together an individualized plan of support for them. We actually put a process in place that we called a pre-CAP plan, which was building a process over the summer where these students had support so that they wouldn't have to go on an official plan come September, which was the guidance by ODE. So at Creekside, we did not have any students on plans. At Tigard High, we had 19, and Tualatin 29, again on those pre-CAP plans. Over the summer, you'll see that 5 were completed at Tigard High and 27 completed at Tualatin, and we're currently supporting the students in that far right column currently into their 5th year. Next slide. So we are going to talk at first about more of that 1-year story. How did TTSD work to ensure success for all seniors, as well as justice for those we've historically and most disproportionately underserved? Next slide. And just to set context again, this is when we shut down, and within about 24 hours, the community, families, and our educational system had to pivot. And what we worked really hard to do is have this balance of rigor and grace to continue learning and to shift into that new mode of instruction, while also putting in a lot of safeguards and grace for our students and families as supported by ODE's guidance. So just a reminder of what that context was. Any student passing as of March 13th received a P for their courses. Any student that was able to demonstrate their essential learning of tasks by the end of the semester received a P. For any student that had not done those things as of March 13th, we had a form at each of our schools that teachers filled out, which were essentially kind of like support plans, where they put in the student's name in addition to what courses or what work needed to be completed, and then a team of adults wrapped around that student to work with them to complete those pre-CAP plans that I discussed before. And that was a lot of the support just policy-wise that we had in place around our grading practices and policies to ensure that so many people were dealing with transition and hardship and loss of work, et cetera. So doing the best we could, again, to support learning while also allowing for quite a bit of grace for our students. Next slide. I'm going to transition over to Principal Bailey and Principal Delerba, who are going to talk about our systematic supports that we had in place for the class of 2020.
I think prior to the pandemic, and really a strength of our secondary schools, all 3 of our high schools, is the support we get from our counseling departments, from our career and college centers, and working with students in getting across that finish line, and a number of other programs throughout our school. But with COVID-19 hitting, we felt a need to kind of streamline that efficiency. And so what we did across both of our large comprehensive high schools and in our 3rd high school was create some tracking documents to really look at not only our seniors who need to complete coursework, but to make sure that we met all of the ODE guidelines that were outlined in the communication in the spring about building CAP plans, about credit assurance, like process that goes along with those plans, but also the scheduling of their career and college readiness plans, and to make sure we tracked those pieces. Those were all new elements in terms of us centralizing in one document. Those were many of those things we were already had in place, but the key was to kind of identify some point people in the spring to make sure we were continuing contact. What we didn't want to happen was a large number of seniors fall off of our radar completely because of a lack of communication about who's doing what communicating. And so while you can read through the slide, just in general, we centralized our process and streamlined across both high schools in one document that all could access in any given time. And it became kind of a running comment in our administrator meetings where exactly our graduation percentage was in that moment. And so I feel like last year more than ever, we had a more in-depth look at what's happening in real-time data because of that streamlined document process. Brian, did you want to fill anything else in?
Yeah, I'd just say that, we knew what every kid's story was at any given time. We knew what they were doing high school related, what they were doing post-secondary. That was one of the requirements from ODE was, what are their post-secondary plans? And so we were tracking not only how are they doing relative to their graduation requirements, but what are they going to do after high school? And so we had all of that documented, like Michael said, in one document that anybody could check at any given time and see where a kid was at relative to graduation, post-secondary, and beyond. It was actually something that we have tried to replicate for this year. So we're going to be seeing a very similar tracking document being created for the second half of this school year for the current class of 2021, which we'll get to in our next meeting.
Next slide.
So when you look at, kind of some of the steps that we took to support our students last year, I have in 20 years of education, I have never seen the level of support and the level of outreach by teachers and support staff and everybody else for kids to make sure that they're doing whatever they can do to help these kids get across that stage. So you look at what our teachers have done, our reach out for our families and our affinity groups and our technology support. It has been absolutely remarkable to see the level of support that they've given our kids and our families. And there is a laundry list on that slide that you can all see. But it's been trying, it's been difficult, it's been hard, but it has been also fulfilling. And I think Michael will attest to this, and Amber and everybody else, like when we make those connections and when we reach out to those families and we see that the connections mean something, it's been pretty remarkable.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that we looked at all level of needs, all the way from basic needs that needed support, all the way through specific technological support, all the way to one-on-one academic support, and even some specialized programming through the summer and into the first quarter. I think that's why across our schools we're seeing a lot of those seniors who were on really the cusp of not graduating last year completing their plans. And so that, as Brian mentioned, that was a team effort across so many different programs and so many responsive staff members and community partners that it really was a community effort. Yep.
And I think that lean into partnership is just, I really want to pause there for a minute. I mean, you'll see on here where people pivoted for a lot of our family was around living insecurities, around fulfilling food insecurities, helping families get connected with rent and utility assistance, in the midst of also trying to stay connected around academics. But just our distance learning support teams were just an incredible, collaborative, connected, community-centered response team that really wrapped around our students and families. Yep. Next slide. Now I'd like to bring in Principal Romas, who's going to talk about the systematic supports for the class of 2020 at Creekside.
Thanks, Amber. Hey, everybody. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for being here. Yeah, just hearing Brian and Michael talk and Amber as well, I'm just reminded about how this pivot was really remarkable. And I don't know, we came together in a way that maybe you only would during a time of crisis. We leaned on each other and we formed teams to make all these things possible. And I would say that to reach that level of care and support for every kid, the way that we were able to, it took working in some new ways together and also with the teachers and the counselors and the staff in order to create the conditions where people could make it happen. So I feel really lucky to have been a part of that. And I think it was really special and left us in a place where we're ready to move forward into some work together now that maybe wouldn't have been possible before. So that leaves me optimistic about the future. Our work at Creekside, we were kind of lucky to be set up the way that we were, because our whole system is designed for kids that have ongoing struggles and obstacles and complex situations in their lives. And this was really just another one of those, but for all of our students and all of our teachers at the same time. But what we saw was that the systems that we had in place were extremely durable in allowing us to make some good things happen for our kids. Our advisory system is set up so that each of our families has a key point person in school, as well as that student to know deeply, to communicate with regularly, to really know the whole story on a student situation so that we can build a school plan around each of those students. And that's what we did for our seniors last year. We, like these guys said, came at it from where are we now? Where do we need to get to? And anybody that's not graduated as of the big calculations that we all did on the end of March, we made plans of, here's a checklist of all the things that every student might need to do to graduate on time, whether they be a 5th year, 6th year, even a 7th year senior, because we serve them all at Creekside. And it was pretty miraculous to see kids see those plans, lean into them, work with their teachers one-on-one and in small groups, and through all kinds of hustle and hard work and miracles, we graduated a lot of kids on time. And our numbers don't look great, but it's important to remember that at Creekside, we're oftentimes bringing in kids as juniors or even seniors that might be 2 or 3 years behind in their credits. So we do a lot of catching up for our students, and we do that through the customized school experiences, but also by offering multiple extended credit earning opportunities or classes that people can take and opt into that's going to work for them based on their situation. Also, the basic needs support was huge. We also do things like offer employment support and help kids get jobs and all kinds of things, because they're often in a position to need to help their family, their younger brothers and sisters, and all of that continues to be true as our students navigate the pandemic this year. I think that's all I got there, but I think we're ready for the next slide. So I talked a little bit about the Creekside comprehensive approach to working with kids one by one and making their school experience unique for them. The other thing I would want to say is that what it means to be an on-track Creekside student it's hard to say. I'm not really always sure, because each student's coming in with their own scenario and their own timeline. And because we think that through when they come in, we might take a junior who's 3 years behind and say, hey, you're probably looking at a 5th year. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's how we make the most of it. So a lot of our seniors, even though they might not have finished on time, they finished on time for their plan. So we're still working with many of them this year because that was how we thought about it to start with. That's also true of our 6th year and 7th year seniors. We occasionally do lose a student who isn't able to finish by the time they age out and they turn 21 before the start of the next school year. But those situations are very rare. By and large, even when our students, as Paul was talking about earlier, they kind of may disappear for a time. we have relationships sufficient with each of those kids that we always know where they are, because they're still calling or emailing or getting in touch with their teacher, letting them know what's happening. And then when their time comes again, they often come and re-enroll 6 months later, a year later. And I've got 3 or 4 kids on my mind tonight that that was true of, that have re-enrolled and have finished up with their GED or now are on track for graduation at the end of the year. So we're pretty proud of that work. And if it's possible, we do our best to sure make it happen. So with that, I'll pass it over to, I think we're going to Brian.
Yep. No, thank you, Russ. And I would say, like, you know, we still have some kids that they've pursued their GED or they've pursued their high school completion in some other format. But when we get the majority of these students that are coming back for their 5th year or their 6th year, many of them are in credit recovery classes. They're in general education classes. They're in some of our internal alt-ed programs like CE2. But one of the areas that I think is important to highlight is that we've struggled with what we call high school completion. So HSC, when you see it on that slideshow, with the change to the 4x4 model in the schedule itself, we've struggled with that, and that's been a miss for us. But when we think about limited in person and what we're hoping to be able to do in the next couple of weeks with bringing kids back, that's one of our primary groups that we're focusing on at Tigard, is our high school completion. So these are students that are only in credit recovery classes, and so they're in credit recovery during the day, and then we want to bring them back in the evening with sort of a case manager in one of our counselors that is willing to volunteer to come back prior to the vaccination. And he's going to host some evening events, and so we're identifying those students. And that we believe, even in spite of the 4x4 schedule, that we can actually get them to advance through some of that coursework. So we're excited about bringing them into our building, bringing them in with support to try to get through some of that coursework that they need. But it has been a challenge to engage many of our 5th year seniors in this work, and to trying to get them to buy in to getting a couple of more credits, getting a couple of more classes taken care of. We believe that they're capable. We know they're capable. But we're trying to, we're struggling to get them to buy into doing what it takes to get those last few credits taken care of. Michael?
I'll just add a few things because there's such similarities and a through thread in terms of how much support programs are offered at the large comprehensive high schools and then also at our 3rd high school. And so I won't add to those too much other than to just say we also raised the bar in high school completion in the last year. Prior to COVID, we took a deep dive into the curriculum for high school completion that's used also in our CE2 programs, and decided we wanted to raise the rigor level to match some of the programs that are already offered at Creekside and Ingenuity. And so we had made that decision along with our alt-ed teams prior to COVID-19 happening. So if anything, I think we've seen an increase in rigor in those programs and the expectations we have for students that are completing that. So not that that's an excuse for anything, but I think I'm pretty proud of the fact that we're expecting more of our students in this time, even though we probably could have set that decision aside. I feel very proud of the students that are in there working so hard right now, and it is alike all 3 high schools. We don't have wildly different curriculum, which is, I think, a big step we took last year prior to COVID. So that's one step. I think an additional blind spot that this is illuminated for us at Tualatin High School is just how much follow-up needs to happen when a student falls off our radar for a variety of reasons that Paul explained in the beginning of the presentation. I think, when I'm watching my tracking document last year, and I'm saying to our team, we're up to 97%. That's 97% of the seniors that are coming to us every day. And we had 29 seniors on CAP plans. 27 of them finished through our summer and chasing them down. But there are some students that are just falling off of our radar for a variety of reasons. And so we need to close the gap on those. And so I think that's, that's a piece that we rely so much on the people who are point person for each one of those cases, and bringing that information back to the team, so that then we need to chase down the school in California. Did they make the records request? Did that student show up? If they didn't show up, how do we get them re-engaged? I think that's some of the follow-up pieces that sometimes we lose track of in such a large system. So I think it's been a real learning experience in terms of those elements. But in the future, I think we'll try and tighten down the hatches a little bit on tracking those that leave, even though, as Paul mentioned, it's really tough to do that.
Well said.
Thank you. Next slide. So as Paul mentioned earlier, the fact that there's 2 stories in this one graduation data point. And so we just want to also highlight that for your part of the story, there was definitely some learning and some reinforcement that our current areas of focus are the right areas of focus, and we need to be continuing to put our work there and to go deeper. And that's specific to our grading practices, our continued implicit bias and equity work, our culturally responsive instruction, which is our rigor, our differentiation, our relevant community responsive curriculum, and then furthering our work on our restorative, welcoming, and community-centered schools. So these are all deep systems level work that we have started and that we are continuing to do. And again, reinforcement that we need to keep going, because this is that bigger 4-year story that Paul was alluding to in our systems, where we don't want to see any, of that increase in students dropping out prior to senior year. And these are the ways that we ensure our students stay with us. And so I'd like to also invite Dr. Sue into this conversation around ESSER funds.
Thank you, Director Fields. Part of the ESSER funds, the second allocation that we are going to receive, the first allocation was used primarily in support of PPE, HVAC upgrades, and plexiglass shields, trifolds for students, which has already been presented to the board in the January updates. The second allocation is expected to be approximately 4 times the amount that we received the first time. And we had a final number of about 5.7 million. Those dollars can be spent through, Director Moore, correct me if I'm wrong, 2023, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. 2023. So we are looking to measure them out so that there is long-term support, as we know that the COVID recovery will take an extended period of time. So dollars that will be allocated to support our work moving into hybrid and extended and limited in-person opportunity in the short term, a robust summer school opportunity, and then tools to help us move forward into the fall. And they will certainly be targeted specifically in ways to these groups as well, where there is a need, will continue to be a need for additional staffing and supports so that we can help these students get across. For those who may be observing our meeting this evening, the state of Oregon provides opportunities to districts to continue working with high school students until they turn 21. And it is our commitment and obligation to do so. And so again, bringing those funds along with, as I'm fond of saying, braiding with student success dollars and district funds so that we can get the major support and bang for the buck.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Next slide. So just to close out, we are looking forward to the follow-up conversation to this, where we're going to be talking about what did we learn from the class of 2020 that informed what we set up this year? What did we improve? What did we keep? Looking at our Q1 and Q2 data, our current on and off track rates, our supports in place for the current class of 21, as well as our grading policy and safeguards. So again, we appreciate being here this evening. We hope that we were able to give kind of the narrative and the story behind the data point, which can be hard to interpret just in a number in and of itself. So we hope this provided context for that, as well as areas that we believe we can continue to improve to better serve our students. So thank you for having us this evening.
Director Fields, thank you for that. Board members, any questions for our presenters?
Not a question, but I definitely want to give a shout out to Principal Romas because he earned the Golden Hedgehog last year. Dr. Sue knew that his numbers would be what they were this year. So just very exciting.
Thank you, Director Emerson. It was a down payment, and clearly I made a good investment.
Yes. Well done.
I have a question. I think so. I guess first I should say that, I mean, the one slide about all the different supports and sort of work unique to COVID was overwhelming. The amount of work that teachers and administrators put in that moment or in those months was amazing, and so much gratitude to everyone who played a role in that, and to the administrators who kind of led that effort. I want to ask so I hate graduation outcomes because they're designed to compare, and the comparisons aren't always fair. And so I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about that. And so what I mean by that is we saw some districts in Oregon who saw their graduation rates shoot up during the pandemic, as if the education outcomes were so much better. And in our district, we saw a decline in graduation rates. And I don't think someone could make the argument that our employees and our staff didn't work as hard or harder than any of these other districts who saw increases. So I'm curious if you can kind of, from your perspective, and this, I don't know if this is Amber or Dr. Sue, kind of talk a little bit about what went into the differences when people look across our public education system in Oregon, how to understand what those different shifts in numbers what might be behind those numbers.
I'll say a little bit, and then Dr. Sue, do you want to add or go first?
You go ahead.
Okay. I think one thing that was really interesting as we really unpack this, right, is understanding the impact of the 4-year story and seeing, and I just don't know what other districts' 4-year story was, so it's hard for me to say, right? But when we look at our cohort and saw where we were having students drop out along the way was a really interesting data point. I think what we all assumed was during COVID, we had this big spike of students that just stopped doing work. And we actually made up in that time with all these supports and I also don't want to imply that these were only in place for COVID, a lot of things that we had done, but I think we ramped it up and we could actually speak to every student by name and need and support, which I think was phenomenal work that was done and a benefit from the COVID experience. But I think that story, we would need to know for every district, where were all of your students over that 4-year story? Where were they all as of March 13th? How many kids did you already have passing? A lot of us adopted that safeguards for seniors. So that was pretty common. I know we've adopted a safeguards even this year as well. And Northwest Regional has been sharing our grading policy and practices out for others because we are really wanting to hold kids harmless given all the complexities that them and their families are navigating. But I think that's some of those data points we'd have to look at and understand that same narrative and story of these other districts. And ultimately it's going to come down to a classroom teacher, and are you deciding to pass or fail based on X, Y, and Z, policies and practices in your classroom. So you'd almost have to have all of that unpacked to side by side to really understand why somebody would have improved, whether on their 1-year story or a part of their 4-year story. So It's a little bit of a gray answer because I can't tell that whole story for every district.
No, but Amber, I really appreciate the way that you laid that out, because I think our 1-year story with the kids that we had in front of us last year is amazing. And what we were able to do for the kids that were enrolled in TTSD to get them across that finish line and get them to graduate last year was amazing. It was Paul's work on the data for the students, and this is not an excuse. It's not okay. It's not it's just not okay. But those kids that weren't with us because they had left prior to last year, that hurts, and that's what we need to do better as a system. But the kids that we had in front of us last year and the number of them that we were able to get through and across that stage in that 1-year story was amazing.
Director Bowman, I would just add that in addition to what Amber and Brian said, in our conversations, and Brian and Russ and I talk to principals all over the region, we're not doing anything radically different. I think the bigger questions are, what are we doing prior to senior year? And those are system moves that we have identified and already have some strategic plans for prior to COVID. So I think it illuminated some of those for me in terms of what is missing at the team level for a kiddo through 9th, 10th, and 11th grade prior to really being on the graduation radar. That's not news to me. And that's certainly not new in the research. Mm-hmm. So, I think those are, to me, blind spots that were illuminated through this process. But in terms of across the region, there's nothing we're missing that's radically different at the senior level.
Because I guess, sorry.
Go ahead, Director.
So you can close after I comment. Michael, I appreciate you saying that. I feel like, Paul, the 4-year data run that you presented, I feel like that's a different lens on how we've looked at it. So I think about Brian and Russ and Michael, your improvement plans, right? Those frames and these data points that now we're analyzing. How do you bring that together, right? So it's not just 9th grade on track. What does that impact in 10th grade, or who? And so just trying to marry those pieces together so it's a system, even like the board on that kind of dashboard checking in. It was just and I think, Amber, you and I have chatted about it, and I didn't quite click. And Paul, I would not right now, I won't ask you to do that, but to dig a little bit more into those numbers as well, because I don't know if I totally tracked with you, but I thought it was really interesting. And I appreciate the different lens to look at how students are moving through our system and what are our strategic plans around that to ensure we're capturing them along the way. But sorry, Dr. Sue, I was just thinking so much about Ben's comment. It was a great question. So.
No worries. So Director Bowman, I'll answer that question on 2 fronts. When we take a look at across the state, I think this team is expressed because they are very knowledgeable and very much in touch with their peers. And so the work that we are doing is not dramatically different because it's a prescribed subset of best practices described in research as to how you get after this. What I would also say is that TTSD has had, prior to my coming on board, had been doing some very intentional work about addressing the graduation rate in general, and finally breaking that barrier at the 90%. And I will tell you, statistically, having done this work in other districts, once you break through that barrier, you've taken care of most of the low-hanging fruit that is easily accessible in terms of student conditions and needs. And when you get past that 90%, now you are dealing with some very difficult, deep, systemic issues that have been in place for a very long time for that child, for the family, for the community. And so this has been the opportunity. When Director Fields speaks to the opportunities here, there have been many lessons learned in this pandemic that has opened the eyes of our teachers K-12 and our administrators K-12, work that we were trying to initiate prior to the pandemic that was, well, we'll get to that. And now it is laid bare. And so this idea of, are we all on the same path relative to how we assess students and grade them to standard? And that is a sticky wicket and always has been at middle and secondary, because it's sort of the last province, if you will, of the individual practitioner. And so aligning them relative to what do we want for the student that is rigorous, that is engaging, and that is as accurate as possible in terms of being objective. And so this is where the rubber has literally met the road for TTSD. Now, the good news is that people are very open to that and really want, as you can see by this work, you don't do this level of work teacher by teacher if you don't understand the mission. And so that is the opportunity going forward. And again, I go back to the ESSER dollars. Why wouldn't we want to leverage some of those dollars in terms of professional development to further that work, so that we can get to common grading practices, common ways that are aligned to standards, and formative assessments that help us all know that we are comparing apples to apples. Number 2, internally. The fact is that, to Director Wolf's point and Director Fields' point, we don't just check in with you at 9th grade, we're checking in with you at 10th and 11th and 12th. And I would offer, because of the work that Director Fields has done, it's really a watch list that starts at 6th grade. And this is why you hear me say that the path to high school starts really, we talk about elementary, and that's, yes, that's important, but it really gets serious at about 6th grade. Because now is the time when the student is developing and has more agency and choice as to how they're going to engage or not. And so it's a watch list at 6th, at 7th, at 8th, and transition into 9th. And that is also the work that is in front of us. It is that care and feeding along that whole trajectory. And again, this is where formative assessment is huge. I cannot stress that enough. Summative doesn't do you any good. It's the autopsy. It is the formative assessment that makes the difference, because the teacher then has opportunity, as does the team, to change or to reinforce or revise the way in which that content is being instructed, so the student gets it, feels successful, and moves forward.
And the one last piece I would add to that, because we've talked about that system side, I think it's so important that we're marrying this with our MTSS process, where every 2 weeks we check the temperature for every single child in our buildings, where we've got decision rules that we run data. We have tier 1, 2, 2.5, and 3 teams that are then looking at student work, running our student success protocols, running our Atlas protocols, putting our systems of support in place, and then responding all the way down to the individual level. So responding in the, those that are in the systems now, and then doing that long-term work to improve the system. So we have less students that show up, right, on our tier 2 and 3 lists that are needing support because we've built a stronger system. So I think those two things together are really important and a huge area of our focus of work that's already in play.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, Director Fields, is Rowan and Emily, I would love to hear student perspective on how we move our system towards that formative assessment, towards that work that Dr. Sue was talking about, just common experiences for every kid in the classrooms, and what that would feel like from a student perspective. Because I think Principal Delerba and myself and Principal Romas, like, we are on this page, but how do we get kids to buy in? What does that look like from a student side to have that, so that your experience is not determined by your address or your zip code?
I mean, I think it's a big topic. I didn't realize I was answering it now, but I think a short answer right now, it's so much determined on external factors as well, because so much experience is based on who you're in the class with and how I interact with the students around me, and that shapes a lot of the experiences with when you're going into history and English classes, where discussions become like a really big part of the curriculum. And so for it, you kind of feel belonging more and more encouraged to come to class if you have friends. And so I think part of that experience of, okay, like, I think we'd be missing a part if we didn't say that, like, the social factor matters as well. But I think, in terms of like align what the curriculum and the academic experience in terms of like workload, it feels similar. It's just how we approach it as students. We just know how to do it in different ways because of the way that because of our circumstances. But it's a big topic, and I want to talk to you more as well.
And just to clarify, so formative is more of the standardized tests?
I would say formative, Rowan, is like those regular check-ins with teachers when they say, hey, do you get this? Yes, no. Your standardized assessments or your cumulative assessments are your big tests, right?
Right.
But that formative is Did you get this? Yes or no? Give me a 1 through 5.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think students might take better already to some of the formative stuff rather than summative, just because if you give more of a standardized thing or like a big thing that's not really like engaging, then it's just like school. It's like, oh, I got to do this big test. People just automatically kind of dislike that. And so it does kind of like get the teacher engaged with the student, which I think helps. It's a tough question that I will have to think about more, just how to get the students to buy into it. So yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Do please.
I wanted to follow up quickly on something that Emily said that I think was really wise, and that's that social piece. And I think that we touched on it briefly, but the kind of transformation that we're after here is not just one about academics and assessments. As we all know, it's also about creating a socially and emotionally attuned environment for all of our staff and students to be a part of, where they feel connected and seen and understood, and where they can be themselves, and where, you know, their brain can be calm enough to where they can learn. So we got some really exciting work that we're trying to move forward with related to social and emotional learning, our equity work, our circle work. Those things are coming in a strong way. And I think that soon we're going to see kind of an avalanche of good things start as people start to grab hold of those ideas and work with it. So, you know, I'm hopeful that moving into next year, we might be able to keep some of this advisory work that we're doing this year at our big comprehensive high schools, that we're able to stay focused on bringing those lessons that help people grow as people and their ability to connect with each other and treat each other with care and respect. I think that really is what makes the difference in how our kids feel, because primarily we're not thinking rational ways that we interact with the world. Primarily, we interact with the world through our emotional experience, and we're starting to see that and work with it.
Just wanted to also ask if Emily and Rowan, do you have any questions after listening to that? That was a lot of information. So just, you know, curious at what you all thought and if you had questions specifically too. And you can also email me later if you think about it more.
I don't have any at the moment. I feel like the support that we got in the spring was really great, and I'm actually really grateful for that 1 month pause where you were just able to kind of take into the situation, and it was very great communication from the district, as in, okay, like, let's have time to figure this out rather than it all be chaos. And so yeah, I really love and I really appreciated the work that we did then as students. Heard a lot of great things, and actually many students said like quarantine has been really great for them and they've learned a lot of things and had many like epiphanies from it too. So yeah.
Thanks everyone for the added context and information there. One more comment and then a question, a last question from me. I think what I was getting at, and I appreciate Amber's perspective here too on like we don't know what was happening in other districts, but I think it was Paul's report where it said the state granted districts wide latitude in how they responded in terms of grades and course completion and what that means. And I was fearful that because other districts were seeing increases, particularly among students of color, students who are from economically disadvantaged homes, students with disabilities, and ours was and our rates in those areas were decreasing, that it was somehow an application of course completion or grading. But it doesn't sound like that is the theory based on Amber's perspective and also the principal's perspective. So that was just something that stuck out with me that I've been trying to process and think through. My final question is kind of a more specific one. The students who are identified for summer, I forget what the official name was, but the sort of summer completion, Tualatin's completion rate was exceptional. It was like 27 out of 29 students, which struck me as really, really good. And Tigard's was, I think, 5 out of 19. So what was the difference between how that program was applied? And was there any learnings from Tualatin from that summer program that you think might be applicable across the system?
I think really, Director Bowman, we're looking at individual plans. And the majority of the Tigard students had anticipated a 5th year prior to COVID. And we're already working on full enrollment this year. So they're enrolled in gen ed classes. They're enrolled in other coursework this year. And most of them were planning to do that prior to March 12th.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to add, think of the students that were on CAP plans as receiving a tier 3 support. And at that tier 3, you are individually problem solving based on a variety of complex needs, number of credits, you know, what that real individualized plan needed to be for each student. So while the system was similar in the sense that we had hired an adult specifically to be leaning in, checking in with students, offering support, I know a couple met like one-on-one distance, providing that support, did home visits, right? Like some of those just systems pieces were similar. It then also came down to the individual story of that student, how many credits they actually needed. They weren't on CAP plans just simply because of what happened between March and June. So that's the other piece.
Yep.
Okay, thank
you.
you.
Oh, sorry. I was just waiting to see if Director Bowman had any more. Didn't you say you had one more? Okay. I just appreciate all the information. I'm kind of a processor, so I'm trying to, I was looking at the data that we were given earlier and now the slideshow, so it's a lot to take in. But I just wanted to say a few things, and that is, Paul, I really appreciate the explanations on the slides so that we have definitions and whatnot. I know that's something that is helpful as a viewer of the information to grasp it a little easier. And I did notice too, the information that the board of directors were sent earlier had some interesting ways of stratifying the data, including foster children or students and homeless students. And I didn't see children of incarcerated parents, but I was just curious, how do we decide what are the right, slices? How do we slice this data? And I don't want an answer right now, but I wanted to say I appreciate, because I see our district evolving into more data centric in terms of just really letting the data, delving down into it to understand what's happening and going on. Like that's the 4-year versus the 1 year was really insightful to me. And so I just want to commend our district on just the work around our data and data analysis. And because I see what's happening, like with Russ, with your incredible rates, despite COVID, I see that you focus on the relationship part. When we pair the relationship part with the data, sounds like a very powerful combination. So I like our direction that we're going in. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. So a couple of things that just for future, maybe part 2 or maybe individual conversations is one, how do we slice the data? How do we know it's the right way to slice it in terms of the groupings we're looking at? I guess where are the biggest learning opportunities by the way we slice the data? And then secondly, we talk about tier 1, 2, and 3 supports. And I'm not sure, I know that when I was in pediatrics for 7 years, the pediatrician used a similar red, green, yellow, and they had a care management stuff. But I'd really like at some point to understand better as a board member what those are and how we use those in a daily practice, especially in high school. I had a little bit better understanding in elementary and middle school, but how do we use those in secondary or high school? So I'll stop rambling, but I just wanted to thank you and lots of process, but I appreciate we're trying to dive deep. Thank you, Michael.
I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm not going to ask you any questions because you've been here for a while already.
Okay, truly great presentation, Michael. Thank you for the offering to the board too on digging a little bit deeper into the supports on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So with that, truly, you guys, thank you. That was a great conversation. And I think we will, at this point, move forward to item B, which is hybrid and limited in-person learning. Dr. McCall.
Okay. Good evening, all. And so while Patty will share the slides, but I wanted to start out by saying for my part, what I will share tonight is our elementary hybrid and limited in-person timeline, as well as kind of spotlight what our enrollment looks like to date with our families choosing either hybrid or 100% online. And then Director Fields will share our secondary plan around limited in-person and the cafe engagement. And so what I shared at the last board meeting was that for elementary, which includes pre-K, we decided on a hybrid model that was a half-day model. And hybrid is half day in person, and then the other half online learning. And so looking here at our timeline, I've included the waves of vaccination, COVID vaccination that our staff and other employees, and started in wave 1 was our pre-K to 1 staff, which also included our custodians, our front office workers, bus drivers, nutrition staff. And then again, after that was wave 2, which included our 2nd through 5th grade certified, classified, our specialist counselors, and those staff in 2nd through 5th grade that have direct support to students. So by our staff getting the opportunity to receive COVID vaccines with the 2 doses, and then 2 weeks after that, allowed us to set a target date to bring back our students from instruction. So if you look at the timeline, that for pre-K to 1, that means that our students, our pre-K 1 students will start on March the 29th. That's the week after spring break, with a 1-week transition for our 2nd through 5th graders starting in April, on April 5th. And before that, the week before spring break, our pre-K to 5 staff who will be teaching in hybrid will be coming in to the buildings. That will give them an opportunity to continue teaching in CDL while also preparing the classrooms to be ready to receive our students on the 29th. You also see on this timeline the other waves for our middle and high school staff to receive vaccines. We have started on wave 3, but that is not yet complete. And we have not started wave 4 for vaccinating our high school staff, which includes student teachers, coaches, and other district staff. And that's the final wave. But what you do see is that we have limited in-person instruction for a small group of students that for various reasons are not engaged in CDL, or for students who need more specialized services, and or for students who need tier support. That has already started. And so you see on the timeline, we started with a small group of elementary students who needed some specialized services. as well as we started this week with middle level and our Creekside High School started limited in person. And you'll hear more about our high school limited in person. For the next slide, I would like to share with you what I shared last time. This is the hybrid schedule. It is a half day cohorts A and B, and with students receiving instruction in math and reading in person, and then asynchronous instruction either in the morning or afternoon that includes work independently. And then the next slide. This is a snapshot of data that we've collected to date of our families who have shared with us their intent to either go to the hybrid model or schedule and or stay in 100% online. And as you can see, it is broken down in racial demographics. The data is showing that the majority of our families today are choosing 100% online as compared to our hybrid. And then the no change from the fall is just that our families have not yet decided. Our deadline for choosing either hybrid or 100% online is midnight tonight. So families still have opportunities to choose, or you'll see the no change.
So Dr. Lisa,
yes.
So of the 4,362, if you do not hear from them by midnight tonight, then whether they chose CDL or hybrid should stick, right? So if okay, half of them are hybrid, they would drop into the hybrid column. Okay.
Yes, and that is for the remainder of the year.
Okay.
Again, this data doesn't tell us the complete story of what our families are having to navigate. And we feel for them because we know that for what, there's reasons that families choose either or. That could be based on childcare, having to work. What I've heard from some of our principals, some families are communicating to them that they're wanting to stay the course for consistency of schedule. We heard a lot of families during the school community meetings who had questions about wanting to keep their same teacher. That was a real concern for some of our families, as well as concern about student safety and is it safe to go back during the pandemic? And those are real concerns. There are challenges and barriers. But what I can tell you is that our principals and support staff, through the support of our basic needs teams and our family partnership advocates, they're getting those stories. They're listening to our families and hearing some and barriers to either or model. And just like our families are having to make these difficult choices, so are our staff who also have children. Some of our staff who have children in TTSD. And those are some real concerns. So, we'll continue to give you updates. Again, like I said, this is data thanks to Susan Bernard, who pulled this data for us and we're able to share it tonight. But we will keep you updated.
Can I ask?
Go ahead.
Just a clarifying question here. So of the 4,362, what's the current breakdown of 100% online versus hybrid?
As to where it's either on another slide, and that should be a link. I can get that link to you. Showed where they moved from either hybrid to online, but I don't have that on this slide here.
Dr. Lisa,
Susan,
if I may help there for just a moment. The 4362, that does include parents who have responded. It just they haven't changed their mind. So we haven't heard from everybody. It's definitely growing, and it was 25% last Thursday, and now it's well over 60%. So I just want to make some clarification that that 4362 includes parents that have also responded back. And exactly what Dr. McCall said, that if they don't let us know, we'll keep them with what their choice was in the fall. And then the breakdown of our percentages of 100% online versus hybrid from the fall was 25%. And I will see if I can get the number for you, at least at this moment in time, at the end of the presentation, just to give you an update of where we're leaning towards.
Thank you, Director Bernard. Is there any questions from the board on this one slide? Other questions?
So just to make sure I understand, Director Bernard, so what you're saying is right now about 25% of our families want the hybrid model, 75%. Is that what I'm understanding? I guess I'm a little confused.
Sure. Let's talk about which time frame we're talking about. From the fall, when we asked parents this question, we landed around a quarter of our families went 100% online. I will get that number as of now, given that parents still have a little bit of time to see what that trend looks like. It's definitely higher for 100% online based on Dr. Lisa's slide here, that more people are sliding over to the 100% online. And we have the majority of our parents have responded to the survey. And I just wanted to clear up that it wasn't 4,000 that haven't responded. They just haven't changed their mind.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. When we start throwing around percentages, I start getting confused about what we're at. So thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions on the, this data? Okay. So as our principals and their staff are continuing to hear the stories of our families and what they need, we, with our CARES funding, as you know, we have partnered with Club K and YMCA. And so we have those on-site childcare, and those sites currently, they are at or nearing capacity at the 5 locations. So that's the indication of the need for childcare. And there's a few more slots available, but again, like I said, those sites are near capacity. So our next slide is just the next steps in our work around pre-K to 5. This week, we're still surveying our pre-K families regarding their choice, and we'll have that data later this week. But for, like I said, families have up until midnight tonight. We are also starting limited in-person instruction starting on the 16th in a number of our elementary schools. And again, that is a small group that will continue up to March, the week right before March the 9th, and then we'll transition to hybrid. That does not mean that we will not provide supports when we are in hybrid, or seek out how we can best support our families who choose to stay 100% online. We have a pre-K to 5 scheduling team collaborative that meets weekly, and that has diverse representation from our administrators, our association reps, as well as classified staff, transportation, and we will continue to tweak and analyze data and monitor how things are going, as well as discuss alignment between our CDL and our hybrid models. And then we will continue to prepare for possible adjusting in our grading practices as we transition. So next I invite Director Amber Fields to share with us opportunities that we have for secondary limited in person, as well as what we're calling our engagement cafe. So with that, I turn it over to Director Fields.
Dr. Lisa, can I ask one question before we move off of this slide? Sure. So is it the goal or expectation that a student in the 100% virtual and a student hybrid model will have the exact same number of instructional hours in both experience, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily, but in experience, they are so similar. Yeah. So, but we're not concerned about not meeting instructional hour requirements, regardless of what the hybrid model now is. The minutes are similar to what it was, what it is now, the asynchronous and the synchronous. So that hasn't really changed that much. Any other questions from the board or our student reps? Okay. So next, Director Fields.
Hello again, everyone. Next slide, please. So secondary LIPI, or limited in-person instruction. I just wanted to anchor us back into what we've prioritized K-12, which is really, LIPI is about engaging students that have not been able to engage in CDL. And so these are been our priority, using our MTSS data, driving what students are needing that additional support to just access CDL, and above and beyond just from a technology perspective. That's needing that caring adult and that support, that kind of in-person cheerleader to be accessing CDL. So just to clarify, LIPI is not about direct instruction, it's about engaging students in their CDL courses. And some of the limitations we're currently working within is that we all know that we're on volunteer staff only. And I just want to take a moment, Director Zerschmidt, I appreciate your comment before. We are so grateful to those that are choosing to volunteer, and also grateful for those waiting for vaccination. We've tried to be really clear, there is not a pressure to volunteer right now. Teachers and staff are in a really hard spot where they are having to, sort of weigh that ethical dilemma between their own health and their family's health and their deep passion for serving students. And so we just want to keep bringing that in the space that, it is volunteer at this point. And we absolutely respect and support those waiting until vaccination. But working on volunteer staff only, which has been challenging, just to identify a large enough number of staff that are also not teachers, because they are tied to a bell schedule, and CDL or a LIPI cannot interrupt CDL. We're at about 2 buses per school, and that capacity is driven by the transportation that will be needed for our elementary program to run when they roll out their half day. No more than 20 students and no more than 2 hours at a time. So we've had to be really thoughtful about our time frame so that we're not traveling students during their class times, but we're getting there right before. They can stay on campus 2 hours. We're transporting home at lunch and bringing the next group in at lunch. So what we've got going on is what we're calling engagement cafes. And again, it's around engaging in CDL. So our middle school engagement cafes launched this week. Fowler and Tualatin started today, and Hazelbrook will be launching on Thursday. Tigard-Tualatin High School will be launching their engagement cafes the week of February 15th. And some of our student groups have adjusted based on our staff availability. So as Principal Bailey and DeLerba mentioned earlier, there's a focus on our seniors and around credit recovery in these first groups. And we'll absolutely be looking to expand as vaccinations continue to be completed for secondary staff. At Creekside, they have previously launched a one-on-one student support limited in person, and we'll be expanding with engagement courses this week, which is pretty exciting. They're going to be doing some night courses as an engagement strategy, as well as additional engagement cafe and courses beginning the week of February 15th.
Director Fields, can I just want to touch on something that you just said. So the schedule that Dr. McCall showed us in one of her initial slides. So we anticipate that rollout of vaccinations for secondary to continue as it has for our first rollout of 1 and 2, correct?
Yes, so wave 3 is in midst right now. Wave 4 is predominantly the rest of secondary. So they're really in that last wave.
Okay, but I just wanted to confirm that it looks like we're not just there yet based on the schedule.
No, we're not finished with wave 3, which includes middle school. And once wave 3, that'll allow opportunities for a wave 4, which includes high school.
But all those that wanted to get the vaccination should be in those waves, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
About 20% of wave 3 have completed. And again, this is the TriMet area, so it's all our neighboring districts at the same time. But what I know is that we're looking at maybe starting probably around February the 15th. And it's also dependent. Right now, we know that in this wave, our governor also prioritized our seniors getting their started, and we also have our child care providers that are also getting the vaccines as well.
Dr. Lisa, just I think my sound when you said the schedule for the wave 4, just to clarify, you said they're ahead of schedule right now. Is that what you said?
We are waiting to complete wave 3. Right now, what we've heard that they're only 20% in on wave 3, which includes middle level staff and support staff. So they're up. Once wave 3 completes, then we can start on wave 4. But as you see, wave 3, we might not even get to finish that by our second week. And that's just one dose. Then you have to wait, depending on whether it's Moderna or Pfizer, which there's a 21-day with Pfizer after the first dose. And if it's Moderna, there's 28 days from the first dose to the second dose. And then you have to wait 2 weeks after that.
So what I hear saying is that the graph is still pretty accurate as where we are with actual immunizations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for that, because yes, that vaccinating schedule is definitely driving a lot of just our hard timelines, right? And so that is just one thing we're keeping in mind as we plan and as we are, ready to expand, and we have lists of kids at the ready. But we just keep adjusting as that vaccination schedule continues to move. Next slide, please. So here's just some photos from today. You see some of our administrators on the bus that rode to welcome and greet our first round of students in limited in-person instruction. And we've got some students coming into our brand new Tualatin building, which was really exciting. And then at Fowler as well. So this was, some of that first time experience. And I definitely know those Tualatin students were excited to be some of the first students to enter the completed building. So, it was exciting to see all the hard work that our administrators have continued to do, as well as all their staff, to continue to pivot and support students. And just wanted to put on here, although we're talking about, a handful of students coming into building, we've had a lot of staff that have been and continue to support our students and families by going to their homes and doing home visits. So that is also a part of our limited in-person work. And I just want to continue to lift and bring those staff into the space. So big shout out to them, and shout out to our schools that launched this week. Next slide. So just some of our next steps when it comes to middle and high, again, waiting for that vaccination. schedule, as well as that safe rollout of pre-K-5. But really the problem we are now here to tackle and solve is, given the ODE guidance and no more than 4 cohorts, no more than 100 students, as well as following metrics, the advisory metrics, how do we transition to an in-person instructional, social, emotional experience that is least disruptive for students, as well as protects their and their families' health? That while we will have our teachers vaccinated, we do have to remember, especially with our high school students that carry the virus more similar to adults, that them as well as their families are mostly not vaccinated. So again, we're just trying to be very thoughtful. And when we know exactly what that timeline is, and trying to make an educated guess around that, you know, what decisions do we make around that experience, and going back to our hybrid plan, and how do we adjust that to still be very meaningful for our students and again, least disruptive. So some of the next steps we'll be taking is that we will be having our TTSD secondary collective task force, and it will include folks that have already been helping us all along the way, working to revise that hybrid plan based on our new tentative timeline. Again, vaccination schedule driving that, as well as our safe rollout of pre-K-5 per ODE's guidance, that we can show that we can mitigate risk successfully. As we know, 2 through 5 is rolling out around that April 5th timeline. So giving that time to settle and roll, and then looking at bringing in our secondary. We'll also be participating on the ESD secondary planning team with our neighboring districts to tap into that broader expertise, as we're all working to solve this complex problem of what is good for kids, what is good for them instructionally, again, social, emotionally, given the time frame, given the context, and given some of the constraints of the guidance when it comes to how much students can still mix and move about the buildings with the number of students we serve. So again, not starting at ground zero, but really going back to our plan and revising it accordingly is our next steps for secondary.
So what does it look like if we can only have our middle schoolers in 4 cohorts? If they have 7 periods a day, how are we going to combine classes so that they're in only 1 cohort for English and social studies? Or what's the preliminary thinking? And I realize it's all preliminary at this point. But
I want to be really clear about that, because one thing we believe is very valuable is to continually working alongside our stakeholders. But I think that is where there is a lot of discussion to be had. And do you disrupt the instructional model? Do you stay in CDL? And do you then have other social, emotional, social, et cetera, in-person activities for students? But it's less about moving about the building like a normal school day, because that's just not possible, right? Elementary, it's 1 room, that 1 classroom model. Middle school had worked to that around the teaming to make that as small as possible. But again, given the timeline of likelihood of when all secondary staff will be vaccinated and the time that's left in the school year, what do we do really well? There are aspects of this that is working, and there's an in-person aspect that's needed. And we know that. And we want to be really thoughtful about what those pieces are, and not just disrupting all of it just to say, hey, let's figure out how to just get back. Because getting back and then maybe 2 days later shutting down for 14 days and pivoting home, what we don't want is, oh, wait, shift to this schedule, shift to this kind of learning now, right? Students need as seamless as possible. And so all along we had talked about online being the hub of how students were going to learn in case we had to pivot and you had to go home. It would not disrupt your instruction. Our staff are working so hard. And, I know many that have I've got this now. I've got this way that I can engage kids. I'm making it work. Would I do this forever in this mode? No. But I finally got a rhythm now, right? We have to remember teachers have pivoted so many times, and we are now just getting, in that rhythm and routines that folks are getting used to. We had a whole new flip of schedule at middle school that is actually working for a lot of students. So again, how do we complement what is working as opposed to just throwing the whole baby out just to say, hey, we're back in hybrid, right? So again, we're just wanting to be really thoughtful about that.
Yeah. Director Fields or Dr. Sue, just wanted to clarify. I know we've been working closely with our neighbors, Beaverton School District, Hillsborough, and it sounded in public comment that their alignment or their plans for secondary are different, or just wanted clarification if that's possible from both of you or one of you.
Director Wolf, I want to read from a communication that went directly from Beaverton School District to parents. And it basically says under the middle school, high school, and option school, they speak about a BSD Connect. And what it states is that they are looking to start that on April 19th, the first day of the fourth quarter, so the last 9 weeks. That will be for middle, high school, and option schools if the metrics can get there. And what they will be doing is talking about keeping students online for their basic instruction, so that model is not disrupted. At the same time, bringing in students by specific groups, such as AVID, clubs, community service, specific course activities, and specific social activities, while students remain in CDL for their academic classes. This is directly from a communication that came from BSD. So I think that's part of the confusion, is our districts talking about limited in-person and then a different form of hybrid. And this is the reason, to Director Fields' point, relative to the ESD, in Washington County, Beaverton District, Hillsborough School District, our district, Forest Grove, and Sherwood will be coming together to try to thread the needle relative to this connect concept, because it is challenging, as Director Zerchmead has already alluded to, as well as Director Fields, to get to any kind of a quote unquote normal in-person schedule when you are limited by 100 no more than 100 interactions and 4 cohorts. And so the belief is that you bring all of these great minds who have done years worth of work in terms of master schedules and movement of students together, and really fully flesh out this connect idea. And I think that is the direction that this team is going to go.
I have a question I think is kind of aligned to this, or maybe completely aligned to this. I don't know. So students participating in sports are not considered part of a cohort.
Correct.
So,
Totally connected.
I know it's not technically Lippy, but if our drama students or our choir students or our affinity group students want to come together and meet, and there's teacher volunteers or district staff volunteers who wanted to do that, what is the possibility of that kind of an arrangement, and what would the implications be for the instructional model?
I would give the overarching, and I'll let Director Fields give it perhaps more detail, but I think there are 2 pieces here. The constraint around Lippy is that if you were calling it a limited in-person, you can have no more than 20 students for no more than 2 hours. And that's where we are starting now, simply because we have volunteer staff. We don't have enough staff yet to fully flesh out this direction relative to what Beaverton is calling BSD Connect, this concept of what you're describing around affinity groups, Director Bowman, where you would have the opportunity to come in for longer periods of time. And we would refile and redevelop the hybrid plan and refile it with ODE that says, we're bringing them in by these groups for this reason, for extended periods during the day to augment what they are receiving online. But it's not limited in person in terms of having to stay constrained within the 2. Use your 100 for that type of grouping versus the limited in person 20. We have to start with the limited in person simply because of we are constrained by personnel.
So is there, I guess what I'm wondering is, if we did it in the evenings, for example, and it was totally disconnected from the instructional model, there's no.
Yes, thank you, Director Bowman. Yeah, go ahead, Director Fields. But no, yes, you are now untying the Gordian knot that we've been trying to untie with ODE guidance. You have to be very thoughtful and careful that you are following, because again, remember our district's liability is also tied directly to the guidance, and so we have to be really thoughtful about how we do that. If we're calling it evening, if the evening opportunity is relative to instruction, that's an instructional cohort.
Well, so let me clarify, I guess. So sports are not instructional. Historically, drama club is not instructional unless you're taking drama class. Newspaper is not instructional. These sort of like what we're hearing from students and parents is like the social and mental health deficiencies are some of the larger concerns. So I guess I'm just, OSAA has said these things are okay and don't count towards cohorting and are sort of exempted from your rules. Do we know if there's another body that's exempted, or we don't know yet?
Don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, And I would say, we would point in the direction back up to ODE and ask the question. My guess is what they would say, you're either going to call it hybrid and you're going to develop your plan that way, you're going to call it limited in person. OSAA, because it's an independent body, stands alone. And so they've been able to, get their tea leaves to split, if you will, so that they can stand alone from instruction.
But the good news is when we get there, yes, we can do that kind of work. Right now, because we have, there's only so much capacity, we've got to start with the kids that aren't connected and successful and engaging in CDL, just because we've got to work from the highest priority and need kind of, down the list. Not that those are any less important. It's just where we have to put our resource right now. But when we get there, and that's kind of, again, part of that conversation for when we are able to come back once everyone's vaccinated, those are absolutely, when you hear that BSD Connect, those are the kind of things that would accompany CDL instruction. So hopefully we'll get there soon.
Also to Director Fields' point, when we look to some of our neighboring districts that have smaller populations, such as Lake Oswego, Westland, Wilsonville, even Sherwood, they are able to be a bit more facile because they have fewer numbers. As I've shared many times before, TTSD is blessed, as well as in that awkward sweet spot where we are small enough as a community that we care very deeply about our schools, but large enough that we have these constraints relative to banging up against the limits of 104 cohorts that other districts that are smaller than us, significantly smaller, do not have as great a struggle with. And that is something also in the Beaverton's recent communication that they highlighted.
So given what you just told us, which is helpful, would it be reasonable to assume that we would start with some kind of, what we call it, connect or hybrid or secondary mid-April sometime? Would that be given that we're partnering with other districts have indicated mid-April? Is that a reasonable assumption, or are we just not there yet?
I think we're not there. I want to be really careful about throwing out a hard timeline because I think we're all looking for anything concrete in this just day and age. And because, again, we are at the mercy of the vaccine schedule for our waves 3 and 4 for secondary. But I think roughly, that mid to end of April would probably be when our guidance starts to shift. And if we go in that direction of a connect, think of it as LIPI plus our CDL. But we would be able to expand, not be constrained to 2 hours, not be constrained to just a smaller amount of groups, et cetera. That whole process could expand much greater.
And Director Fox, I would also share with you that both Superintendent Grotting, myself, and Superintendent Scott from Hillsborough continue to advocate to the governor's office directly relative to allowing ODE to revise the metrics relative to the 4 cohorts and 100 students.
It really is extraordinarily trying, and I sympathize with all of the parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers who see everything that's being done for the elementary school kids. I've talked to so many elementary school parents who are so grateful that we have a timeline. We have a pretty good idea of what our date is to be back in the building. And I know that that's something that's really helpful to have a plan that you can kind of like, okay, it might swish a little bit, but we've got a number. And so I totally understand why the middle school and high school parents are so anxious to get that same thing to grab onto. And it's just that there's so much still up in the air for that group and how to make that work. But I want those parents to know that their cries are not unheard and I'm very sympathetic to them.
And I think one thing we're trying to really avoid is saying, all right, it's going to be April 15th. And then, oh, darn it, the vaccinations were held up. We didn't get as many. Oh, we're pushing a week, push a week, right? And I'm a parent as well, and that's been really hard. So I sympathize as well. And I also recognize that change of timeline is also really difficult as well. And we're trying to not do that and to make some really educated and thoughtful, benchmark of timelines, given the information we have as we get it. So.
So I know we jumped in, Amber, with a bunch of questions. So I don't know if there was additional slides for you and Dr. McCall that you wanted to wrap up with.
That was the last slide, I believe, but we did want to be available to answer any questions you have. And so again, we thought we would be almost done with wave 3, but again, we're not. And hopefully we'll start back soon.
I'm wondering if we could develop some kind of like simplified version of like this presentation just for students, because that we can like put in, that we can talk about during advisory, just to keep us updated. Because I know we have like so many pieces of information and we get like, I don't know, like sometimes different things from our teachers. And so it like, because I know we send messages on Canvas, or if we just had some sort of graphic to keep like our students in the know, that would be, I feel like that would be really great. And yeah.
That's a great idea, Emily. Thank you for wanting to add that layer of communication. So I'm sure that Director Rose or someone will be in connection with you guys to get you set up for that. So thank you. So being mindful of the time, it's 8:56. So I think that we'll go ahead and move forward. Really important presentations this evening. So thank you, Director Fields and Dr. McCall. So we still have one more report and discussion, and that is the moved item B, which is Dr. Ricky Smith regarding the draft of the East District Plan. Dr. Sue.
Thank you. This, I will be brief as you've had a chance to take a look at this. We are currently, what you have before you, the only adjustment made between this version and the one that was presented to you on December 14th is resetting the timeline for districts actually writing formalized EASH plans beginning the school year of 2022 to include them with their SIPs. The reason for that is they are already doing some of that work now, but given the fact that they are now focused in terms of either moving into hybrid and standing up instruction at the elementary level, or standing up some version of limited in-person and potentially some form of hybrid going into middle and secondary. It was the consensus relative to the team and vetting it. I had a great conversation, Director Bowman, with our student Abdi Mohammedan, and shared same, and he felt that that was reasonable. He was actually encouraged to hear that maybe seniors would get a little more love if teachers were able to focus in that direction. And so, please know that the policy is in place and that administrators have been and will continue to be trained relative to looking for anti-bias and hate. And then it'll give them an opportunity, along with the committee that I know, the oversight committee that the board will be standing up, to provide greater input as to what specific information they may need to want to also see as a committee within those EASH reports, and we can adjust from there. But at this point, this is what we would offer you as a beginning marker for beginning work with the EASH plans and putting them into formal practice with the school SIPs going into the beginning of next year.
Okay, very good. We've all had an opportunity to review it, so I'll just look if there's any specific questions. If not, we'll move forward to action. Excellent. Dr. Ricky Smith, thank you for that quick update. And with that, we will move to action items, and we will start with our Art Rutkin Elementary School project. And so appreciate Damon has been hanging in there with us, probably got his own little update, maybe more than he wanted, but he is current on our online CDL hybrid activities. So with that, I'll hand it over to Director Moore.
Thank you, Chair Wolf. Good evening to you and members of the board. This evening, we have an action item. We're proposing for the guaranteed maximum price for the contract with PNC for the Art Rutkin Elementary project. The ask amount for approval is $41,031,014. And we're also asking for approval to allocate an additional $3.75 million from the second bond premium for the project. And with that, first, I think I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Pearson from Day CPM, and then Damon at the end to make the Bond Oversight Committee's recommendation. But Debbie is available to ask technical questions in addition to sharing a response she had with Director Fox today on her specific questions related to the project. So I'll turn it over to Debbie first.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. I did want to inform everyone of a few questions and answers, responses that I shared with Director Fox. One of the questions that she asked is, what are the general conditions? In this particular memo that we sent to the board, we did divide out some of the costs associated with the project into and showed the general conditions. And she asked, what is that? Because we haven't seen it on prior bids. It is included in every single construction project. It just had not been delineated in previous board memos. General conditions are that work that is required to support the construction operations. So an example of it might be temporary utilities during construction. It might be porta potties during construction. It's those things that the general contractor is responsible for as opposed to individual subcontractors. Another question that came up was a question around the CAT tax. And are we seeing that throughout the construction industry? And the answer is yes. As of January 1 of 2020, the CAT tax came into effect. And for contracts that were signed after that date, the contractors are passing through the CAT tax to public agencies. You may be aware that we had contractors that were under contract with TTSD at the time the CAT tax came into existence, specifically Pence at Tigard High School and Trippett Wellman at Tualatin Middle School. Neither of those contractors passed through the CAT tax for the completion of the scope of those contracts because the CAT tax came in the middle of their contract, not before we signed a contract. So they ended up having to pay that CAT tax and not be reimbursed by the district. And then finally, the last question that Dr. Fox had was related to a quick explanation about the cost escalation of the project. The original bond budget for this project was approximately $27 million, and the current GMP estimate is approximately $41 million. So it's about a 50% increase over the original bond budget. The majority of, well, it falls into three buckets in terms of the additional cost. One bucket is escalation in the marketplace, and there's two issues associated with that. One is that the original bond budget for this project envisioned that we would carry this project for approximately 3 years and then start the construction on this project. And as you know, we are now into year 5, trying to get this project moving forward between the land use issues that came up, as well as the lot partition and pulling permits. So as you know, we're now into year 5 rather than year 3. So there's additional escalation costs in the project. The other thing that is greatly increased over time has been when the bond was originally developed, the on-site construction costs were envisioned to be, or budgeted to be, about $2 million. Our current estimate for on-site construction costs are closer to $10 million. And I believe there are two things also that impacted that increase in costs. One is I don't know that folks really thought deeply about the impacts of developing a site that's as steep as this one is and the issues that are associated with that. We have a great amount of work that we are going to be doing during the preliminary phases of grading and erosion control and building 2 very ginormous retaining walls at both the lower end of the site and the upper end of the site to create a level middle portion of that site for the school building itself. So I think there's those kinds of costs about the site itself. And then the other piece that has skewed that on-site cost is I don't know that when the bond was developed back in 2015, 2016, that there was a real clear understanding about the requirements that would be imposed for the development of this on-site. So trails that are going through the site, detention ponds that are being built on-site, the utilities that are being carried on-site, et cetera. So I just think it's part of it was that piece as well. And then lastly was jurisdictional agency requirements. We've had some ongoing negotiations back and forth about other commitments that we need to make, for instance, with Clean Water Services for things that they're looking for in our permit application. So those are some of the contributing factors to why this project has escalated as much as it has. So with that, are there any specific questions from anybody before I turn it over to Damon?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Debbie, for that explanation. I just thought it'd be nice to summarize since you kind of lived it over the last 3 years. But just, it's nice to have kind of a summary just as we're voting on this. So thank you.
No problem. And Damon, I will let you take it away from here.
Okay, well, one of the things that Debbie talked about was the escalating materials cost in construction. And that is one of the reasons why we're here tonight, a little earlier than I think what was the plan to originally present this to the board. So in every project like this, the contractor gets together with the management team, Debbie and her team, and they try to identify areas where there can be savings and still build the building in the way that it is envisioned. They've done that work and they've identified just shy of $600,000 in savings. But as quickly as the industry is changing, if we don't get the contract signed immediately, those savings will evaporate in increased materials costs. So the information was presented to the BOC. We did not have time to call an open meeting, but we emailed back and forth with each other, and we are comfortable making the recommendation to the board at this point in time along the lines of what's been presented. The 3.75 million additional funds has been set aside by the BOC all along. So this is not a new concept. Our goal from the very beginning was to make sure that we got to the end of this program and that we had enough money to construct everything that we wanted to construct. And spending this 3.75 in that regard still allows us to do that. We're checking all of the important boxes here to make sure everything gets done the way we want it. Keeping our meetings open to the public is very important to the bond committee, but we felt like it was more important to save 600 grand. So we will report this information and approve it retroactively in an open meeting the next time we meet. And the same set of information that was presented to the board in your packet will be included in the meeting minutes for the next bond committee meeting.
So Damon, always appreciate your time, you and Calista, and the whole committee. Gives a lot of their volunteer service to provide oversight. So just appreciate your time this evening. And I have questions for Damon. Okay, so I think with Director Fox's questions that Debbie covered, I think we can move to a motion.
I move to approve the amendment number 1 to the GMP in the amount of $40,941,684 and increase the GMP to $41,031,014 for the Art Reckon Elementary School project and approve the allocation of an additional $3.75 million from the school or from the second bond premium to the project.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded to approve allocation as presented. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a quick roll call. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Director Bowman.
Aye.
Director Emerson.
Aye.
Director Fox.
Aye.
Director Zertsmead.
Aye.
Director Wolf is an aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Debbie, Damon again, and Director Moore. Okay, our final, no, not our final, but our next item on the agenda is the urban renewal resolution. I know that Sean Frawley was here, but I see Mayor Snyder and I think a couple other folks from the city of Tigard. So thank you all for coming this evening. What I will say is I think the board has done deep due diligence in terms of the work session that we had in December, or the report that the city provided to us, our work session last week with Jim Green from OSBA, and then the follow-up of questions. And Sean, I appreciate your quick response to Director Moore so we could get those answers. So unless there are specific questions for Mayor Snyder or for Sean, who are here with us, I am entertaining that we go direct to a motion. We've spent a lot of time deliberating this, so I'll look for comments and I'll look for a motion unless the board has something they'd like to address prior to a motion.
I have one quick question. And I don't think that either of the folks from Tigard can answer it. Actually, I'm looking to you, Chair Wolf, because I'm recalling way back when we did this with Tualatin, and we were told that there would be no impact to our local option, or our local option, that we then in the subsequent year found out that we had lost out on $1 million because of some weird something, and you were the only other person on the board at the time. But I was racking my brain going back to, this was 2011 or 2010, I think, where we had a subsequent $1 million hit that was unexpected in the local option. And I'm wondering if you remember that, or if I'm...
Well, two quick comments, and David might know just because he just might know, but he wasn't here at that time. Bonnie was still here. Two things. I think that the board approved the levy or the urban renewal, but the city voted it down.
Right. That's correct.
So I'm not sure the timing of that blip with the compression. I also know, well, that was going to be my next comment, is we were in severe compression.
Right. And that was...
and so I don't know if that had the impact because it was devastating across, all collections. So
that was what I couldn't get straight in my head, was whether it was just compression or whether there was something else, and whether that subsequent... Oh,
Jason seems like he has an idea, so I'm going to let Jason address that.
I actually am noticing that Elaine Howard, our expert in this area, who's not a Tigard staff member, but is helping with those kinds of details, is on and kind of waving her hand. So I'd like to ask if it'd be okay if she were to speak and perhaps help answer.
Thanks, Mayor Snyder.
So I am not sure what happened in Tualatin and whether or not it was compression, but since that time, there have been changes to the statute about what monies urban renewal may or may not take. And urban renewal may only take money from the permanent rate levies. It may not take money from local option levies or take money from general obligation bonds. Now, if you were to go into a severe compression again, my mind can't really function on what impact that would have. I don't think it has an impact, but if somebody wanted that kind of an analysis, that takes a lot of work to get to. But I do know that the overall changes of not taking anything from geo bonds and again, not anything from local options was very clear on our parts when we had the statute changed.
That was what I was thinking, but I had too many moving parts. And the expression you pulled when you started talking about it was exactly the same reaction I had this weekend as I was digging into it. It was like, oh, my head hurts so much.
Whenever anybody talks about compression, you just kind of think, oh, yeah, I can explain compression if you give me about 4 days.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember the legislative change, so thank you. That's what I was hoping you would say, but I just wanted to do my due diligence and make sure I asked the question. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, I think I appreciate the City of Tigard for the detailed presentation. I also really appreciate the Oregon School Boards Association. Their executive director came and gave a special presentation to us. To me, it is clear that the benefits outweigh the nominal costs that might be coming down the pike. And it seems to me like if there's, to the questions that OSBA brought up, I've been thinking about it more. If there are changes that need to be made, I think those changes need to be made at the state level. But in terms of what we have in front of us, I think it's very clear that this is beneficial to our community. So with that, I move to approve Resolution 2021-08 in order to concur with the increase in maximum indebtedness of the Tigard City Center Urban Renewal Plan.
I second. And can I make a comment too? Is it too
late? Wait for the discussion. I'll be all Robert Rules on you all. Motion was made and seconded to approve urban renewal extension as presented. Any further discussion?
I also wanted to thank the City of Tigard just for responding so quickly to our list of questions. Really, really helpful. And I think we were all educated. We all got pretty well educated on this whole, and so I feel good about this decision and feel like it's the right thing to do. So I also reached out to a couple former city councilors back when they were there, back when this was first passed, just for history to understand. So that was really helpful. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Karen, any final thoughts?
None.
Excellent. All right, roll call. Director Bowman.
Aye.
Director Emerson.
Aye.
Director Fox.
Aye.
Director Zertsme.
Aye.
Director Wolf is an aye. Motion carries unanimously. Again, thank you, Mayor Snyder and team for all your assistance.
Thank you all for supporting this important work in our community.
Okay, excellent. And now we are at our final item, and we might even slide out of here before 9:30 and call for an extension. And that goes to Director Moore, the Talent Search Grant.
Thank you again, Chair Wolf. Yes, we're asking for the board to approve an application, a grant application which exceeds the board threshold of $150,000 for an educational talent search grant. And this is a federally funded program similar to the Upward Bound program. And the part of the TRIO programs that support first generation college students and students navigating low income and completing high school and preparing for and attending college. So I know Susan Salkild stuck around tonight and she's present, but what she shared is that chances are that Tigard-Tualatin is awarded this grant are slim, but what it will do is provide the federal grantor information about the district that will assist with our successful application for an Upward Bound grant renewal upcoming, I believe, next year. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are questions, and Susan is my technical expert this evening related to this grant, if there are questions. And I had thought that the grant, I'm totally missing the dollar amount on it, but it seems like it was $277,000 multi-year grant, but I don't know why it's left off the menu or the memo, excuse me.
So Director Moore, I'm sorry, were we waiting? So Susan's with us or she's not with us?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
she's with us.
Correct amount.
So I think we're asking if there's any specific questions the board needs in order to act on this.
No, I'm I'm good. And I'm ready to take a motion.
I move to approve TTSD's submission of an educational talent search grant application.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I hope we get it, even against the odds. It would be a really great program by the sounds of it.
You're pretty amazing, Susan. I wouldn't sell you short.
Oh, thank you.
All right, we'll do roll call quickly. Signify by saying aye if in favor. Director Bowman.
Aye.
Director Emerson.
Aye.
Director Fox.
Aye.
Director Zertsmead.
Aye.
Director Wolf is an aye. Motion carries unanimously. And with that,
Real quick.
Oh, Ben, go ahead.
So Director Bernard mentioned earlier that she was going to try to look up the numbers for the current splits between CDL. I was just wondering if you haven't, no worries, we can get an email update, but I was just curious if we could have those numbers.
I do have the numbers. They're very unofficial because it's still open for parents till midnight, but it does look like there's an increase of about 12% of parents switching over to CDL or online. So breaking down the percentages again.
Yeah, what does that mean basically in terms of how many kids are asking for, or whatever, families or kids, whatever you've got, that are asking for CDL versus or asking for hybrid?
So in the fall, we had about 24%.
I just want to know today. What
today?
Yeah, I know it's not a complete number. I just want to get a sense of where are we running today? Not in terms of percenting change, but just absolute. We've got
raw numbers.
Raw numbers. We've got 1,000 families signed up for CDL and 2,400, whatever.
You're close. 1849 for CDL. 3317 for hybrid.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for asking that very clear question that I could clearly answer for you.
Thanks for getting those numbers for us.
You bet.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. If you guys wanted to do fun math, that was actually, you could back into it from Director Bernard's table. Just getting a little punchy.
I was waiting for that.
25 plus 12% is pretty dang close. Just saying. All right. With that, I know everybody's tired. So thank you all for your night. And this meeting is now adjourned.